When we're talking about equity release products, we're generally talking about lifetime mortgages, interest roll-ups. And the purpose, of course, of equity release, lifetime roll-ups, is a long-term solution. The interest rates are fixed for life at the moment, and the debt rolls up, of course, but it's not actually repaid until the person dies or goes into long-term care. We know that, don't we? But the point is that it's very, very, very long-term. We're talking, for a 70-year-old, we can talk about 15, 20 odd years, maybe even more. People live longer nowadays, don't they? So we're not talking about a 2-year horizon. So the advisor's role here is to talk to the customer when you're doing your fact finding and stuff like that. Find out what the goals of the customer are and what their plans are for the future. I know it's not easy. Somebody who's 70, for example, may not know, but of course they do, as long as you ask the right questions. So make sure you do a lifeline for the next 10, 15, 20 years. Are they going to downsize? Are they going to move to the coast? Do they want to be close to the grandchildren? Do they want to live in town near the doctors? Ask these questions. You need to know, because the whole point about equity release is there is a great big fat juicy early repayment charge on them, not like normal mortgages, because it's a full-time, like massive long-term fix. So how do early repayment charges work? Well, they vary from lender to lender. So of course you've got to look at the particular provider and what they're providing. But broadly speaking, there's two types. So let's get into to broad types, shall we? The first type is what we call the fixed early repayment charge, very similar to normal mortgages. Take a look at those in a second for you. And the second one is what's known as variable. So let's just put that out there for you as well. Variable early repayment charge. Now, the two types are depending obviously on the scheme you arrange, and it's how the lender finances their money. That's what it comes down to. Now, the traditional fixed mortgage, if you like, lifetime mortgage, is where the lender goes to the wholesale market. So let's just put the wholesale market in there. The wholesale money market, they get their money from the wholesale, just like normal lenders do. They obtain from there a variable amount of money, so the interest rate they're paying in the wholesale market is variable. As you know, they then put that over to the swap market and they swap it for a fixed interest, and the fixed interest, let's put it in there, is whatever the rate is. It varies according to the gilt markets, etc. We know that, but the wholesale market determines it. Now that, of course, is then lent to the customer. They lend that money to the customer or the client, and they add a little bit for a margin, percentage, whatever, for profits and margin, but that's fair enough. And that's your standard rate. Now, they have standard early repayment charges. So, for example, you might have, your 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and in year 1, for example, it might be a 5% charge. In year 2, 4%, 3%, 2%, and maybe after the 5th year, it might be a 1% or 0%, and then possibly the early repayment charges stop. So that's not a bad thing, and that's just like a normal mortgage. It's not difficult to understand, but of course there still is quite a high redemption penalty on that. Now, the other type is the variable. Now, the variable is a bit more complicated, and this is where the lender gets their money from the fixed interest funds that they house. So it could be an insurance company mostly. They have fixed interest funds. So let's just put a fixed interest fund in there for you. Now, when we call it fixed interest, we're generally talking about the fund, a fund that invests in government gilt-edged securities, which of course are fixed interest, as we know. An insurance company has millions, billions of pounds under management in these funds, and all they're doing, as you know, is they're taking money out of the fixed interest fund and they're lending it to somebody on a mortgage at a fixed rate. Simple as that. So they're lending it on a mortgage on a fixed base, a fixed mortgage. They're going to add a bit of margin for their profit, and that's how they lend their money, broadly speaking. Now, of course, the problem with that is that if somebody wants to cancel the mortgage, then there is going to be a variable early repayment charge, and that's where it gets a little bit confusing. Come on to that in a second for you, giving some examples. It's not a straightforward like 5, 4, 2.1%. Now, of course, early repayment charges on lifetime mortgages are not always charged. So, for example, if the person does die, or goes into a care home, they're not going to charge, are they? Often if somebody reaches the age of sort of 88 or 90 and they want to redeem it, they don't tend to charge at that point either. You're allowed to make capital payments on these things, 10% per annum nowadays, typically, without losing out. So you can pay your interest if it's allowed under the scheme. Generally, they are now. But you can also make capital payments of 10% a year without early repayment charges. So that's a good thing. Porting, you can transfer your mortgage from one property to another, typically, and there'd be no early redemption charges. But where they happen, you have to be aware, because it can be quite a large sum of money. So let's take a look at this system here in a bit more detail and explain a bit more on how this works. And then I'll give you a couple of examples. So what we're doing then, as you can appreciate, is lending the money to somebody. We're taking the money out of the fixed interest fund and lending it to somebody. We're putting it as security for property, and we're lending it on a mortgage. There's your mortgage. Now, the property obviously is very well secure, so it's as good as guaranteed as this. Nothing's guaranteed, but it's a very good secure lending. It's very long term, isn't it? And what they do is they take the interest that the fund is charging, and they basically use that, add a bit more for margin, and that becomes the interest rate they charge. It's not more complex than that. And therefore they're making a profit, aren't they? That's how it works. But the problem they've got, of course, is if you decide to cancel your mortgage, if you decide to redeem your mortgage, later on down the line, they've got to move that money back into the fixed interest fund. And they say broadly that if they're going to have to do that, and by transferring your fixed mortgage into the latest fixed, if they lose out on that, in other words, that's a lower rate, then they're going to charge you an early repayment charge. So let's just give an example to see how this works, because sometimes examples help, don't they? I've got a couple of case studies. The first one involves Myra. There you go. We've got Myra. Now, Myra is age 70. There you go. And she's taking out a mortgage, a lifetime mortgage, and she's taking out £50,000, or she took a £50,000 mortgage, and we'll go back a few years, in 2015. Now, when she took out this mortgage, 8-9 years ago now, isn't it? She would have been quoted on her mortgage offer a FTSE UK gilt benchmark rate that was for her mortgage. So when she took her mortgage out, the fixed interest fund would have had a rate that the fixed interest fund was paying, and they use the FTSE UK gilt benchmark, and she would have been quoted one of that. So her FTSE, let's put that in there for you, UK benchmark rate, there you go, when she took out this mortgage, and she would have had that on the mortgage offer, happened to be 3%. So that's broadly what the fixed interest fund was making. Now her interest rate would have been more, because there would have been a margin added to it. Now, this is why equity release lenders always publicise their FTSE UK. So let me give you an example of a FTSE rate. So let's head over here for you. Here's from my friends at AdviceWise. They sent me this through Monday. And as you can see, if I just zoom in for you, this is from summer 2023. The UK 15-year gilt rate is 4.52. That's the latest rate. So if anyone gets out a mortgage now, the lowest equity lease rate, as you can see there, it's just over 6%, but that's the lowest. There's probably about 7% now. As you can see, there's a 2 or 3% difference in margin and cost, so they're making a profit, aren't they? But it's that UK gilt rate that's quoted that's the really important figure. And right now it's 4.5, because, of course, it's been going up over the last few years. We know that. Now, she wants to redeem, there you go, she wants to redeem this mortgage, or she did redeem it in 2021. So obviously a couple of years ago. Now, when she redeemed the mortgage, the FTSE UK benchmark happened to be, and this is quite true, 1%. So what we're saying then is that when she decides to put the money, when she decides to redeem the mortgage in 2021, the insurance company are going to put her mortgage money back into the FTSE in 2021. They're going to make a loss, Do you see what I mean? They lent it out when the UK benchmark was 3%, so she would have had quite a high interest rate, probably 4, 5, 6%. Now, of course, the FTSE is much lower, so they're going to make a loss. So they're going to charge a redemption penalty. And what they do, just to give you the numbers, is they take the £50,000 mortgage. Now they multiply that by the difference between the benchmark rate she had and the benchmark rate on redemption, which is, as you can see, 3% minus 1%. So that's obviously 2%. There you go. Let's put that in there for you. However, they then multiply it by the number of years that she's got remaining, pretty much. Now, when she redeemed it, she was age 76. Some do how many years there are from your age now until age 90. Some do slightly less. But if I did her age now, which is 76 when she redeemed it, that's then 14 years before she reaches 90. They'll then multiply that by 14. And then give you the redemption figure. So I did all the figures on that for you, and it came to just over 15 grand. That's a lot of money, as you can see, because of the way it worked for Myra. Now let me give you another quick example. You can see how it's slightly different. I did this in blue, and I'll squeeze this in for you so you can see that. Number 2. Now this one involves Raina. Now Raina, there you go. Just squeeze that in for you, can't you? Raina took out a mortgage in 50,000. Okay. Now Raina took out her mortgage in 2021, so during lockdown. And by the way, she's aged 75. Just for the ages. Now what happened there is the benchmark, of course, in 2021 was 1%. There you go. So her mortgage would have probably been about 3% or something like that. Now she wants to redeem it today in 2023. Obviously look at the numbers according to when you're watching this video, 2023. Now we could take a look at the benchmark over there, which I've got on my slide, which is 4.5%, wasn't it? So the UK benchmark was 4.5%. So obviously gilt funds have gone up. Now think about it logically. If she wants to redeem her mortgage now, and the insurance company will take her money away and put it into the gilt fund, so they'll start earning more money on the gilt fund than they would on her mortgage. Her benchmark was only 1%. So in other words, they will not charge a redemption penalty because they're going to win, aren't they? So it's all about looking at the UK benchmark when they took out the mortgage, and that's on the mortgage offer. And then when they want to redeem it, the UK benchmark then, if that's higher, you're okay. If it's lower, you're going to be stuffed with a great big early redemption charge. So the key here is to talk to the customer about it, particularly now with interest rates relatively frothy. What are we now, 4.5 benchmark UK gilt rate, so interest rates 7% or so. They're quite frothy at the moment. Whether they'll come down, I don't know. So you've got to be careful that any early redemption penalty will probably cost them a lot of money on the variable side. Obviously you can go over here on the fixed side, but you probably find the interest rates are slightly more. So you've got to look at the options. So look at their time horizon. Chat to them about what they're planning to do. Will they redeem this equity release arrangement, or will they just leave it ticking away till they die or go into a care home? Which is the purpose of the whole thing in the first place. They're not designed for shopping around, let's rebroke your equity release product. It doesn't work that way. It's a different type of arrangement. So I hope those examples helps you to understand it. So quite a lot going on in that whiteboard, isn't it? Hope that's been useful.